All right, I guess we are live. Hi, Kate. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Nikki. How are you?
Great, thank you. Great, thank you. Well, super excited to have you here today. We'll definitely do a proper intro, but we'll give some time for the participants to join. The numbers are climbing, so that's always a good thing. So maybe a minute or two, and then we'll get started. We'll give another 20 seconds. Right at 104. Okay, numbers are climbing still. That's good. More participants weighing in. I know it's always tough right after lunch. Everybody's probably rushing to get everything sorted out. But all right, well, being 104, I think we can definitely get started. So welcome everyone to session 3 of our AI certification course. We're super happy to see your return. So that's great for what is to be another really exciting session in this super interesting series. We trust that you enjoyed session 2. There we took a look into the future with adaptive translation and large language model applications. We've collected all your questions, by the way, and we'll be sending the responses soon. And of course, if there are still any questions that you may have on sessions 1 and 2, feel free to email us at any point. So just as a quick reminder, our certification course consists of 4 one-hour sessions. So this is week number 3. And unfortunately, sadly, we only have one more session after this. But as you know, the sessions are very much designed to be interactive. So please ask questions along the way. We always try to leave time for questions at the end of the presentation as well, in case you want to keep them for then. Either way, we love questions, as I'm sure you've seen already in the first 2 sessions. So please ask as many as you can, and we're going to answer them. And you guys have been doing a great job so far in those first 2 sessions. So very quickly in session 1, just as a summary, we dug into the history of machine translation, the history, the types of machine translation, the benefits and the idea behind why adopting new technology is key to growth and success. In session 2, and Kate, sorry, if I can just get you to go one slide
Oh,
up.
yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. In session 2, that was the continuation of the journey we started in session 1. So I'm going to recap this in a moment. But in essence, we talked about the future of machine translation in that session. And today, in session number 3, we will show you how to successfully implement AI-powered translations in your organization. So we're going to walk through a real case study and show you some key success factors and essentially things to watch out for during the implementation. And then lastly, next week in session 4, we will conclude with showcasing some hands-on applications of AI in the translation industry. So now let me really quickly summarize and recap what we talked about in session 2. So as mentioned, we took you on a journey from the present state where we are today, sort of where we left off in session number 1, and led you into the future of machine translation by introducing 2 major concepts. So first one being adaptive translation. We conveyed the benefits of adaptive. We showed you how it actually works and walked you through different variations. And this one is really important to understand because not every adaptive translation system is created the same. So there are significant differences between all of them. And hopefully that gave you a pretty good sense as to what those differences actually are. We then shifted gears to large language models, or short known as LLMs, what their significance is, and overall use case and benefits of them. But then, and more importantly, we sort of showed you how we can use LLMs to optimize NMTs, the reasons why we should optimize them, and essentially how they work together. And lastly, and most importantly, what the benefits are to translators of that combination between an LLM and an NMT in a combination. So we're super excited about the future. As you can tell, this is really going to be exciting where things are going, and we hope that you are too, and we hope that you actually absorbed a lot of this session. But before we move on with today's session with Kate, just for those that might not have joined us in previous sessions, I do want to do a quick intro of who we are here at Alexa Translations. So for those who may not know us, we help the world's most prestigious organizations in legal, financial, and securities industries break down language barriers by providing both professional translation services on one end, as well as an innovative machine translation platform specifically trained in the domains I just mentioned. And then as evident by the number of words you see here, the legal domain is quite important for us here at Alexa, but we also spend tremendous amount of time in the financial services as well. So with that, it is a pleasure to introduce your instructor for today. And today's session is super special because with us today, we have Kate Kreiderman, who's a senior translator and reviser from the Linguistic Service Department of Desjardins. It's an honor to have you here with us, Kate, and perhaps you can now take a moment to introduce yourself and your role.
Sure. Thanks, Mickey. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate. I've been a translator for about 17 years now, and I've done a little bit of freelance, but mostly I work on in-house teams. The last dozen years or so, I have been with, as Mickey just said, the Linguistic Services Department at Desjardins Group. And I've been one of the team's CAT tool experts for several years now, just out of interest and curiosity. I got started in that. And I was very, very heavily involved in implementing our new request management system in CAT tool a couple of years ago, and then later our machine translation add-in, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you so much. And my name is Miki Velimirovich. I'm the head of product here at Alexa Translations and will be your moderator for today. I've been in the product and marketing industry for over 20 years, during which I've had the opportunity to lead a number of global projects for a number of organizations. Also, at one point, I was a client of Alexa Translations when I ran product and marketing at Mercedes-Benz. So I got to know the organization quite well, and now it's a pleasure to be part of the exactly team that used to take care of our translation needs. So super excited about today's session. I think nothing beats a real life example that we're going to get from a amazing expert like Kate. So Kate, over to you for the session. And very quickly, also wanted to mention we do have Jason Cox, our product manager, with us. He's kind of lurking in the background. He's going to be here for any questions that you may have. So please fire off questions to us at any rate you'd like. So Kate, over to you.
Sure, thanks. So I'm going to talk today about how we've implemented machine translation and post-editing in my department, and hopefully give you some ideas about how to go about it in your own organization. I'm going to also talk about some missteps that we've made so that hopefully you won't make the same mistakes that we did. And I would say that this is mainly geared for translation departments and language services providers, but I think that there will also be some takeaways for freelancers to adapt into your own processes and workflows. So you can see the presentation online. We're going to talk about my team and how steps to rolling it out, strategies that we've used, some challenges that we faced, some of the results, because I know some of you like numbers out there, and also some final takeaways. So before I go into the details about our machine translation implementation, I need to tell you about my organization and my team, because as you all know as translators, context is key to everything. So Desjardins is Canada's largest credit union. We have over 7 million members and clients across the country. In addition to regular banking services, we also offer a lot of other products and services, from credit cards and insurance to investments to HR and payroll services for everyone from elementary school students to retirees, from sole proprietors to major institutions. Now, all of those products and services and audiences means a lot of documentation and communications and a lot of employees. As you can see on the screen, we have over 58,000 employees, and each and every one of them is a potential client of the Linguistic Services Department at Desjardins. There are no restrictions on who can send in requests. So now my team is made up of 28 translators. We have 22 who translate from French into English and 6 from English into French. We only really do those 2 languages. Sometimes we have some extra language stuff, but that always goes out to agencies all the time. We also in-house all edit, proofread, provide advisory services on language questions, and so on and so forth. We're supported by 5 project managers, 2 terminologists, and we also have a stable of freelancers and also a couple of agencies that we use. We've always had to rely on freelancers and agencies because we have vastly more volume than we can translate in-house, and it increases every year. This last bar for 2023, we're projecting that we're going to hit somewhere around 16.5 million words this year. So to give you an idea, we'd need probably about 60 translators to be able to keep up with all of the work, and we have less than half of that many. But of course, with the increase in interest in AI over the last few years, and because my company, just like every other, is looking for ways to optimize costs, when we made the switch to our new CAT tool a couple of years ago and gained the ability to start using AI, we decided to add it in for both straight machine translation and also post-editing so that we could keep more in-house and save on outsourcing expenses. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from, but I'm sure that many of the aspects that I'm going to talk about apply to any kind of machine translation system setup and translation organization context. It's, I think, pretty universal. So the idea of machine translation and post-editing is extremely terrifying to most translators, me included. Just so you know, I do a lot of tools expertise stuff, but I also am an active translator on the team. I do translations daily. But it's clearly the direction that the industry is going in, and the technology is getting better and better every day. And from a business standpoint, it's becoming essential to include it in your workflows. So the question becomes how to introduce it into your workflows without demoralizing your team. Our solution was to start out very nice and easy. We went live with our AI system in the fall of 2021, and it took us just over a year to really dive in with both feet. Now, I'm not suggesting that you need to go quite that slowly. We maybe should have sped up a little bit in some areas, which I'm going to talk about. But I do highly recommend taking a phased approach to it to sort of like gradually work your way into it. So you can see my steps outlined on the screen. I'll just explain each one a little bit. So first, it's important to decide what you'd like to achieve or gain by using AI. We calculated on our team that if we added machine translation and post-editing into our workflows, that we could add 10 new translators to the team and still save money for the organization and also improve quality because we wouldn't have to outsource so much work. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that translation agencies do poor quality work. I am just saying that in-house, we have more access to the writers and we're sort of steeped in the culture of the organization. So it makes a little difference. I'm not saying LSPs are bad by any means. Please don't take that away as this takeaway. And this change, adding translators and reducing outsourcing by using PE and MT, would ultimately keep our service sustainable within the organization. That kind of thing, you can't just add 10 new heads to your department without a lot of approval processes. So it takes a long time to get that decided. So in the meantime, we got started introducing AI into our workflows. So our first practical step, which is step 2 on the slide, is to have a pilot group start using it when we first rolled it out. And the results were very encouraging. Everyone who was in the pilot group was really impressed with the output. And that was really great because when we went live with the rest of the team, their role switched from pilot to ambassador, essentially. So then step 3, when we made Alexa available to the entire team, that was in January of 2022. We made it as an opt-in option for each translation request. So this allowed translators to check out machine translation on different types of requests at their own discretion to see what they felt worked well and what didn't. However, this leads to a couple of extra barriers in using it because there's extra clicks each time they wanted to try out the PE. And then there's the whole out of sight, out of mind situation that I have myself sometimes. So people wouldn't necessarily choose to turn it on or remember to turn it on, even if the request was an ideal candidate for post editing. So to counter that, step 4, over the summer, we did a big push to encourage people to start using machine translation more. So we showed people how to set their systems so that the AI output would always be available in the translation results, so they wouldn't have to do the extra clicks each time. And we ran a session over the summer that was ostensibly a training session, but really it was more of a forum for the former pilots, now ambassadors, to explain what they like about machine translating and what they use it for, the types of requests, and the benefits that they were getting from it, and also give the newer users the opportunity to ask the ambassadors questions and sort of help put them at ease with using it. We also created a couple of specific workflows that automatically incorporated machine translation into the pre-translations. One was for a certain type of fairly short request that we get a lot of, like on a daily basis, that's pretty low stakes that translators would then post edit. This gave them the opportunity to try it out without the above mentioned barriers and on something that we already didn't prioritize in terms of effort and quality expectations, which made it great for just trying it out and playing around and see how it all goes. And we also started doing more post editing on larger requests that we couldn't send to our outsourcers because they were too Desjardins specific or they were very sensitive. Just because of the kinds of requests that we get, this mostly ended up impacting our French translators, who became noticeably more comfortable with post editing than our English team earlier on, which I thought was a pretty interesting point. So maybe start with longer documents and see how that goes if you're getting started. Then step 6, in the fall of last year, we had started a team-wide conversation about what we want to use AI for, and where we add value as human translators, which is a big conversation going on in the entire industry right now anyway. So we asked ourselves, when is good enough, and when do we need something to be fantastic? And as a result of that, we essentially came up with a theoretical decision tree, which you'll also see called a priority grid sometimes, which I'm going to get into in more detail in a bit. Now, you'll see that step 7 is hold training sessions, but before that was able to happen, in December of last year, our business plan to hire those 10 new people and keep more work in-house was approved, which is amazing. It's very exciting to hire that many new people. The counter side is that while we had hoped to sort of gradually roll out our new business model with more people that included a goal of post editing half the time about, due to budget constraints, we had to implement it immediately. So this is the portion of the presentation that I call what not to do. Since we hadn't had the time to hire and train the new people, and we had to immediately stop outsourcing everything, our existing translators were spending all of their time doing post editing before they were even fully comfortable with the idea. They were using a theoretical decision tree for triage, and they hadn't had any real formal training on post editing. I am not going to sugarcoat it. Our morale really plummeted for a while there. It was pretty tough first quarter, I will tell you. Uh, in an ideal world, we would have hired all the new people, then held proper post editing training sessions for the translators, and hammered out a more detailed decision tree before we went live with a very post editing heavy workload. So learn from us. Don't do it the way we did it. Follow these steps instead. So we did manage to eventually hold practical training and develop a more robust decision tree. And I'm going to take a closer look at both of those facets in a moment because they're very key to a successful implementation, I think. But I just also want to mention the last step that we did, which was that in May of this year, we made self-serve machine translation available to Desjardins employees using our trained engine. So they could have the benefit of fast translations of things that they just need for comprehension purposes in a secure environment that understands our unique terminology. So this took some of the pressure off of the team because we didn't have to hand translate, traditional translate. I don't know what we call that anymore. So that we can then focus on higher priority projects that will have an impact on the organization.
Kate, I just wanted to ask a quick question on step number 2, and I would imagine that
Yes.
choosing your, members of the pilot group is probably very important in a case like this.
Yes.
So could you maybe share some what criteria would you use of how do you form a group? What criteria would you use for that choice?
We looked for people that are enthusiastic about trying new things. Because there's always people who are really gung-ho about testing the next new thing and seeing what's going on, and other people who are just very set in their ways. I don't think we have any people who are really set in their ways on my team, but and people, yeah, mostly people who we generally expected to be enthusiastic to at least try it, even if they didn't like it, who would sort of explore the options and see how it went.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like a little bit of a trailblazer, like somebody who really says, okay, there's maybe a way to
Yes.
try this out. Yeah. Yeah. Which
Yes,
is
like in your graph that you presented a few, I don't remember, it was
two,
session
two
2, I
sessions
think.
ago. Exactly.
Yeah,
You got it. That's right.
yeah.
That's right. Okay. Oh, very cool. And we also do have a question from the audience. We have a question from
Mm.
Yannick. And Yannick wants to know, since you have both teams translating from French to English and from English to French, how would you rate the machine translation one way and the other way? Is it equivalent, or does it feel better going from one language to the other?
The impression that our team has is that it's better going from English to French. But I have talked to people in other organizations who find it better going to French to English. So I don't know if it's just the training data that you base it on that makes the difference, or it's also possible that in my team, the French translators didn't have as many other resources as the English translators do, because our translation memories are enormous from French to English, and they're very tiny from English to French. So the additional help of having the machine translation maybe gave it a more positive spin for the French team.
Mhm.
It's hard to say for sure, but the definite impression on my team is that it's better from English to French.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's great. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, I will carry on. So I mentioned both training and decision trees as very important parts of a good implementation. So for training, I don't know how much any of you have looked into post-editing practical training, but almost all of it out there is academic. There's a lot of discussion about edit distance and fluency versus adequacy, and most of that comes at it from a computer science perspective rather than a translation perspective. Essentially, the advice for teams rolling out AI that we found is to do whatever works for your particular situation, which is not super helpful. So one of my colleagues took the initiative to put together a series of training sessions for us. And he started out the first one talking about the academic things like adequacy versus fluency. But really everyone just wanted to know, A, what do I have to do? And B, am I doing it right? So what we ended up with was a series of small group sessions focusing on quickly analyzing and making decisions. Translation is all about decisions and choices, and we just had to learn how to do it faster, essentially, and also learn how to let things go sometimes. So in these sessions, we were all given the same document to post edit individually on our own. And then we would come back together as a group to discuss and compare our results. So this helped us to see how fast or slow we were each working, where we were already on the same page in terms of what corrections or changes we were making or not making, and where we needed specific guidelines to help us get more consistent results across the board. Because also part of having all of these tools is to help us be consistent as a team. And so this led to the creation of our minimum post-editing guidelines, which you can see here on the screen, just this little, it's very basic, but it was just to give the bare minimum of what we absolutely have to do in each segment or check in each segment. But if there's time to do more, you're welcome to go ahead and do more. And over the course of the sessions that we held, I think there were 5 that we had, it was clear that we were becoming more and more aligned on what needed to be changed and didn't in a post edit, which was really heartening and really nice to see. Of course, at that point, people were spending the vast majority of their day post editing outside of those sessions, getting real world experience. And so they were also able to bring their questions and concerns to those sessions as well to discuss in, sort of a small safe group, which I think helped alleviate some of the tension around this adjustment.
Pete, we actually have a very interesting question from
Yeah.
from the audience, from Jose. The question is, were you successful in integrating inclusive translation through machine translation, or is that included in your post-editing process?
That is part of the post editing process. The training helps a lot because we practice inclusive writing on our team. But it's been almost 2 years, and we still occasionally have to make adjustments as we go. But some of it's from the French to English perspective. Some of it is in French, when they write inclusively, they'll say client et cliente, so to have the male and female version. And then in the machine translation, it'll say your client and client. So we just have to delete a couple of lines or words. But it's been gradually getting better and better with the inclusive language for sure as we train it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good question. Yeah. So yes, it's nice to have your translators trained and ready to post edit, but it's also very important to know what you want to post edit. You can't just post edit everything. For one thing, your translators will become absolutely demoralized. We saw that for ourselves when we switched our business model so quickly and immediately. And for another thing, some things just really need to have human intervention from the start. There are many priority grids and decision trees that exist online and in the literature that can help you get started, but they're all pretty generic for obvious reasons, and you'll definitely need to customize them so that they suit your needs and your documents that you work on. As an example, this is Alexa Translation's priority grid that they very kindly provided me for this presentation. And you can see that they've got it here divided between low, medium, and high impact content. And there are no exceptions. It's just, these are the things that we think should be AI only. These are the things that should be post-edited, and these are the things that should be translator, reviser, and QA. Now, for us, as I mentioned earlier, we started very basic and just asked ourselves, when is good enough good enough? And as a team, we went through a list of the documents that we get regularly, and we asked ourselves that for each one. So we said, does this need to be accurate or does it need to be excellent? And the outcome fell pretty cleanly by audience rather than document type for us. But we also ended up making a lot of exceptions. So this is our very base version of our decision tree. As you can see, we ended up with three main categories here. So we have the general public and members or clients, which is the users of our products and services. And in general, it's getting our top tier treatment. If it's going out into the world, outside of our buildings, it is going to be as good as we can get it. Everything else generally could be post-edited. And you can, oh, I forgot to mention, you can see here at the top, we have our 5 tiers of quality or workflows, I guess, not quality, because sometimes the machine is actually very, very good. So everything from translation to QA and QA all the way down to AI only. And this is supposed to be an agnostic presentation, but I will admit that we do use Alexa. That's why I'm here. Yes, right. So given the volume of words that we need to handle each year, we need to prioritize what our translators spend their precious time on and make sure that they're putting their energy into things that have a real impact on our business. Okay. So this is our full decision tree. Don't worry, I don't expect you to be able to read any of this. I just want you to see how extensive it is in terms of exceptions. This one on the right here is the Desjardins employees one, and it has a lot more exceptions than the other ones because a lot of employee experience documents, we want to be higher tier than just PE sometimes. Like if it's dealing with their employee benefits and things like that, we want people to, have a good experience reading about their benefits, for example. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. We had initially looked at breaking things down further into light and heavy post-editing because there's a lot of literature that talks about that, but we couldn't find a way to make a clear distinction between the two, at least for the kind of work we do. So we rejected that concept, essentially. Basically, anything that would have been considered light PE just is straight machine translation. There's no reason for us to spend our time looking at it. What we did come up with in the end was something that we call PE Plus, which gives us a little more time on documents with a lot of specialized terminology, say, or that would require a little more research, or that we need to do a little more formatting on at the end before we deliver the final documents. So we want to give a little more time on them. The quality expectation is the same for regular post-editing. We just have a little more wiggle room in terms of being able to produce a deliverable document. Oh, and I also wanted to mention that these exceptions have been updated pretty regularly since we started using AI. As we get more experience post editing and seeing what works and what doesn't, and as the AI gets better trained and becomes more attuned to our corporate voice, we can make adjustments. Um, like basically on a monthly basis, we update it.
Nate, there's an interesting question here that, and it's more to do with channel communication. But the question is, are you using machine translation post editing in emails? And if so, is there a QA step and how is that done?
Um, what kind of like emails between each other?
I'm assuming in
That
any
would
sort of email communication. Yeah,
that would be the self-serve machine translation that people would use for that. We don't, unless it's something that's going out to a lot of members. That's like being prepared by the communications team that we would then translate. That will be translated and QA'd
got it.
at the like top tier quality treatment. But if it's just emails between employees, they would machine translate that themselves.
Got it. So depending on the use case, basically, in the audience.
Yeah.
Mostly. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
So strategies. Some of the strategies that we have been using are obviously take it slow and let people warm up to the idea. Having cheerleaders or ambassadors is really important here so that they can talk about the great results that they've been getting. It helps make people curious about this whole setup and they maybe want to see it for themselves. A real concern on our team was that we would be sacrificing quality for the sake of quantity. And it was really important to show that you can have both. So they were able to see that for themselves by being able to take it slow. That has been a relearning process. It's not an overnight change of opinion. There's still some debate about the quantity versus quality, but I think that will be ongoing for the rest of the future of translation. So providing training has been really important. And those little group sessions made a huge difference for everyone, I think. None of us learned how to post edit in school. It was not a thing. I don't even know if it's a thing now for the people who are currently in school. It's not a hard concept to learn. It's mainly a matter of helping people gain confidence in this new skill and make sure that there's a common understanding of quality expectations. When we hired those 10 new people this year, several of them have been freelancing for a long time and have done a lot of post editing. But we needed to make sure that they were on our level of what post editing means, not just any level. So, because again, consistency is also very important. I didn't really talk about this in the earlier parts of the presentation because the technology is changing so fast that what I say today might not be relevant tomorrow, but training your AI is so helpful. Definitely make an effort to get an AI that you can train on your own corporate voice or the corporate voices of your clients if you're a language services provider. It helps ensure that translators will have less to correct over time to make sure that it's in line with how we speak as an organization, which helps them go faster. And it also reduces irritants for them, which, again, if you don't want to demoralize your team, you want to remove as many irritants as possible. For us, a great example is the word client versus customer. Our base AI corpus was using customer all the time, but we never use customer. But now all we see is client all the time, and it's great. Nobody ever has to change it. Very helpful. I think the most important strategy is in having the team participate in deciding what the AI should and should not be used for. This is their professional reputation on the line, and they deserve to have input on what gets machine treatment. And they're also the ones that see firsthand how well the AI copes with the different types of documents. So they're best placed to determine whether it's appropriate to use or not in specific situations. The caveat here is that translators aren't always aware of the financial implications of translation versus post editing and what it means for your organizational bottom line. So, if it's a matter of keeping your organization sustainable, you'll probably need to push back sometimes. Um, but in that case, I would say very strongly that transparency is key. Uh, you need to help them understand that this is why they have to do it. Um, always answer why.
That's great. And Kate, quick question. So when we talk about training, particularly the people training, who does those training sessions in your organization?
For us, it was just one of my coworkers who took an interest and decided to do some research and find out what was out there, and then discovered that there isn't a lot out there. That this is actually would be a really good niche for someone to get into, is training teams on how to post edit effectively. Um, and he just put together something that worked, and then as people reacted to the initial sessions, he adjusted uh, as we went.
Okay, that's great.
Okay, so some of the challenges that we faced, there were some that were from the translator perspective and some from a managerial perspective. So for translators, terminology was an issue when we first were getting up and running. We have a pretty rich term base, and I might add some pretty unique terminology. But we weren't able to include it in the training for our AI engine because it required a one-to-one match for each term. And many of our terms have synonyms for different contexts and not necessarily the same number of synonyms in each language. So it was prohibitive to try and prepare something to submit. Um, like even our company name has 4 versions in French and only 2 versions in English, and it depends on how you're using it. But with training the AI engine, it starts to understand the context of when we use each type of synonym. So it's been really cool to see it adapt that way. And again, I will plug using a trained engine. Um, Another issue is the quality of the source texts. Jason mentioned in the earlier presentations that it's very important to have clean data. Our texts, as I mentioned, come from all over the organization, and very few of our clients were hired for their writing skills. They have many other skills that are very valuable to the organization, but they're just not writers, and that is totally okay. But it means that what the engine is working with is not always perfect, and so we get imperfect translations as a result. It means that we have to be a lot more vigilant while post editing and really check things carefully against the source text to make sure that it wasn't misinterpreting, or it make sure that if it was interpreting exactly what the source said, whether the source was what was meant to be said. That was a very roundabout way of saying it, but and then those same source texts get sent to train the engine as well, so that adds additional messiness to the whole thing. I wish we had the capacity to edit everything before it gets translated or sent for training, but it's just not realistic for us because we just don't have the capacity. Um, but if it is for you, if you can do it, I highly recommend putting in the effort. Um, Another thing that translators talked a lot about in the beginning was switching gears mentally between post editing and translating. We try to make sure that everyone has a variety of types of work in their day so that they're not just post editing full time. But it can definitely be a challenge to change mindsets from get this out the door as quickly as possible to please put a lot of care into this. If anybody out there has good strategies for this, please find me on LinkedIn and let me know because I would love to help my translators out in this area. Um, And then on the management side, there's just not really any data to help reassess budget and productivity goals. So there are a lot of questions like, how do we figure out how fast we should be going now that we have machine translation available? Under what circumstances? Should we set productivity levels for QA of a machine translation at the same rate as QA of a human translation? It just sort of feels like having to reinvent the wheel, because there's all sorts of data on translation, but not on post editing and MT. And also, getting translators to understand that the move to AI had to be made in order to keep our service sustainable was a challenge. We're very proud of the work that we do on our team, and we didn't want to risk the potential decline in quality or having to grind out words for productivity's sake. It might have been easier if we'd been able to roll out the new business model more gradually, and then also hold the training sessions before we really dove in. But this is where we are. People have accepted that this is what it is now, and we're getting there, I think. Morale is definitely way higher than it was earlier this year, so that is great. And now for some numbers, because I know that many of you will be curious about how it impacts us. So our productivity has increased by almost 14% this year. These numbers are as of the end of August. And this is despite the low productivity expectations of our 10 new hires, some of whom still aren't fully up to speed. Plus, our veteran translators only had their new productivity expectations for post editing, I think, in August. So we were working with lower numbers, and even still, our productivity is way up. And also by introducing both machine translation in the self-serve and post-editing, we went from outsourcing 70% of our requests and not having the capacity to QA any of it in-house, to now outsourcing 27%, and the other 73% is being handled in-house by a translator, which allows us to focus on more mission critical work. And as a result of this switch, we are spending $2 million less on outsourcing than we did last year, which is, and even with the 10 new hires, we're still saving money, as predicted.
Very impressive.
I'm very impressed. When my manager showed me these numbers, I was like, "Ooh, wow, we did well." So my last bit is the takeaways, some of the lessons that I hope that you'll take from today's session. First and foremost, be compassionate and transparent with your translators. This is a nerve-wracking change, and the future is super unclear. If you want your staff to stay and remain happy on the job, then I recommend engaging them in the process and make them feel like they're part of the decision making. Try not to rush it if you're able. Phase it in gradually, maybe not as gradually as we were doing at first, but don't just change things on a dime like we did, because that's not pleasant for anyone. Translators need time to adjust their mindset and really get used to the idea. Make sure to have supports. Develop a decision tree, provide practical hands-on training, set guidelines, but make sure that they're adapted to your specific team, and more importantly, that they're adaptable. Be open to adjusting things as you get more experience, as the technology advances, as your machine system gets more training. And actually, we just launched a committee on my team to review all of our decisions and processes around post editing to see if they are still valid and correct a year into this new business model, because we made all of those decisions on the fly. And so now it's time to revisit and make sure that we're really doing things the way we want to be. And last but not least, and Jason also mentioned this, remember that AI is part of the solution. It's not the entire solution. It can absolutely help you out and improve your numbers, as I just showed, but it's not an all-in-one solution. It is just one tool in your toolbox to get you where you need to go. And finally, as part of that, keep in mind that things are changing very fast in this industry. So try to look at what's coming next and prepare for that rather than just looking at what's happening right now. For which I would recommend you go back and look at the future of the industry session from last week because it was super interesting and exciting. Questions?
Okay, that was amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think it's always really interesting in these cases, especially when it comes to technology rollouts and adoptions, to really see kind of a real world example from a sizable organization and very important organization in the Canadian ecosystem. So I'm assuming, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you were to summarize this whole experience, which I'm sure has its challenges, was it worth it?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Because
Uh,
I think the numbers, if anything, showed a great result. But I think it's also, you know, the adoption and how can it almost sounded like the ability really to, you know, have the teams focus on more higher value type of activity, right? That this
mhm,
technology enabled is really interesting. And I do really want to point to sort of what you mentioned, and it's very, very true. And I think as we think about where AI is going is really it is part of the solution. It's not the solution. I think it's the
yeah.
combination of human intelligence and power, and then artificial intelligence and power as a combined effort is going to be really the next level. But one doesn't
Yeah.
replace the other sort of thing. So it really is all about embracing it and really running with it.
Mhm.
So that was really really great, Kate. Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
All right, and we do have time for questions, which is good because we do have a lot of them. So I will
Oh, great.
apologize in advance to everyone who's asked the question. We may not get through it completely, but we'll definitely get back to you. But so I'm just going to run through them fairly quickly, Kate.
Okay.
So we have a question about do you have an integration between your CMS, which I'm assuming is content management system, and translation management system?
Yes, they talk to each other. Uh, is, is that seems
Yeah,
like
I
the
think that was a
answer?
simple question. Yeah. Is there an
Yes,
integration between the two?
our request management system, our cat tool, and our AI all talk to each other.
Have a link.
Yes.
Okay, okay, that's great. Next question is we have is for your post editing, do you do all of it in Alexa or do you use Word and then update Alexa with a revised version?
We use it in our cat tool, actually. There's an API that allows us to either pre translate in advance so the translator can just see it already in the translation grid, or we can have it so that it just appears in the translation results in the corner so that they can use it for inspiration if they want, but they're not required to. It's super handy. Highly recommend.
Got it. Okay, wonderful. And Vanessa wants to know which percentage of your workflow is post edited?
It's about half. Um, it's hard. Half of our translations, I think, are post edited because we also have editing and proofreading in our workflows as well. So,
Right. Okay. Okay, great. And Nancy has a question, and that is, what would you say is the average breakdown of pure translation versus machine translations for your translators?
uh, yeah, we aim for 50% post editing. I don't have the exact numbers for the actual breakdown, but we try not to give anyone more than half of their day as post editing because it is quite a lot of brain work to do that. Um,
As we can imagine. Yeah, for sure. For sure. No, that's great. All right. We have another question, and that is, can AI be applied to languages with no linguistic database?
Jason,
I think
this
Jason
might
might
be
be, I
for
was
you.
going to say, that's a very kind of a technical question. I think I know the answer, but I think Jason is a better position to answer that.
Yeah, so I mean, you definitely can, and there's some various techniques for this. Like, of course, if it's another language that's well documented in the world, so to speak, then of course, you can train it on general material, narrowing down to as focused material as you have access to. Now, if it's one of these language that truly has like no written form or things like that, there are still things that can be done, but it's more like inference between languages. And we didn't cover it in this version of the presentation, but or like this certification course, but there, in terms of future of machine translation, there is the concept of multilingual models, models that can handle something like 100 languages at once. And then it's kind of using the inferences from other similar languages to kind of fill in the gaps when there's no content for a more rare language, or a language that is not spoken as much or written as much. But in general, for all of the languages that we're probably talking about, there's things you can do to get training data for that, until you can get something more focused into the domain. You focus on some the other sources for the language.
Very cool.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason.
Of course.
Very detailed. We love it. Always good to have your technical expertise handy. Kate, here's another one from Liliana. Do you think it is a good idea to train members of your company who are not translators, and specifically train them with post-editing skills? Interesting.
I'm not sure that that's necessary. It could be useful to have a guide of the kind of things to look out for in a machine translation, like the typical missteps that a machine translation will make, but I'm not sure if it's necessary to train non-linguists to do post-editing, unless you have a need for it, in which case, the more the merrier, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I would assume in this case, if it's a non professional translator, is that the machine itself would provide enough obviously good quality context that really no need for post editing from that perspective, because that is certainly a skill, I would imagine. So,
yeah.
Oh, very cool. All right, so we have 1 minute left. So Fabiana wants to know, how do you use the term base in an efficient way? In other words, how can it be used more efficiently so the results are better?
If you're able, make some kind of Excel sheet or something that can be sent to train the machine, because it will learn how to use those terms if you tell it to. I don't know, maybe Jason can step in on this too, but for us, because it was so complicated and the way our system exported it, it turned out to be time prohibitive to set it up properly. So we're just basically trusting the training, but it's absolutely something you can do if you have the right setup for it.
Okay, fantastic. All right, and maybe we'll do just a quick one more question to squeeze in. It comes from Nancy, and it's, is there a concern that your company would try to push for more machine translation given the great productivity numbers and lower outsourcing costs? If so, how would you push back on that? Interesting.
I feel like there will never be a shortage of work for us to do. So the more people are willing to machine translate is probably better for us anyway. As long as it's not things that are, going out for public consumption, then I say, great, let them machine translate.
Absolutely. Always good to know that there's never going to be shortage of work, which is really good. All right. Well, let's we're basically
words.
1 minute after two. Kate, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being part of this and giving us the examples from your organization, and really glad to hear that it certainly was a positive outcome and positive experience. And I think this was really helpful for a lot of our audience. We had some great questions, so really appreciate the time on that. And it's just a quick reminder, and Kate, if you could just go one slide forward for next week. It is our module number 4. It is our last session, and we're going to be joined by Joe Lepine, who's going to basically talk to us about the 3 pivots that are going to help translators thrive amid all these technological changes. So thank you once again, everyone. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the attention. Kate, one more big thank you to you. And Jason, thank you for being here for more answers for these questions. And very much looking forward to seeing everybody next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.